I can say that Disenchantment was very different from what I thought it was going to be, but that didn't mean that it was great either, as I suspected the trailer really dumbed down the show, making the characters sound boring and lifeless. In reality, there is some development here. Not as much as I was hoping for, but more than I thought. I really have a hard time making up my mind about this show. Is there humor that actually works? Yes. Do some of the jokes fall flat? A lot do, yes. But is it a good show or a bad one? That's what I'm here to discuss on today's review. Disenchantment stars the three main characters we see back in the teaser, who are unique enough to be interesting and have a good dynamic. For example, at first glance, Princess Bean seems like a typical rebel teen going on a drug and alcohol binge. However, she actually has a real reason to be trying to escape her reality. Being constantly stuck doing her quote-unquote duties has left her feeling caged in her own home. Not only that, but she shows that she wants to be a better person, striving to be something more than a pawn in political games. She also isn't your typical damsel in distress, nor your Xena warrior princess clone. She can fight for herself, but she knows when she's outgunned, and has to outthink her enemies. Bean is crafty, strong, kind, but has many flaws that make her human. Moving on to Santa's escaped toy slave, Elfo, I thought he was going to be your typical dunce for laughs type, but he turns out to be smarter than he looks. He's a bit naive, but this comes from his upbringing in a village that's so obsessed with smiles and songs, it could come straight out of a Disney movie. He does have a mind of his own, and stays good-natured while learning about the gritty world of humans. He tries to be the voice of reason, well, most of the time, and try to look out for Bean, but that's because he's got a crush on her. And then there's our third member of the group, Lucy, who's a demon straight out of Paper Mario. He acts like a smart aleck, embodying your typical bad boy type of character that thinks about nothing but himself. His place in the story is as the instigator of the group, pushing Bean into doing bad things. That being said, he has grown attached to both her and Elfo, and will do good things for both of them. Though he will deny up and down when asked if he does. He will go out of his way to help others in the show, but claims it's for laughs. So instead of evil, or true, as the quotes can be conveyed, evil, I would label him more chaotic neutral. As for the story, at first I thought it was going to be a pretty straightforward buddy-buddy road trip styled show. Oh, on the contrary, it took place mostly in one city and its surrounding areas. A plus in my book because we got to see the beautiful scenery in multiple places and angles, getting a feel of what Dreamland is like. That is when the animators can decide whether to stick to 2D or 3D animation. I can admire the work that went into both, but I really feel like the 3D CGI hinders what the 2D environments bring. It's not bad per se, it's stylized enough and only comes up when the castle is doing a panning shot, but it looks cheap next to the colorful and classic painted looking buildings. It gets even more horrendous when they try to combine the two styles. None of the 3D houses match up with the rest of the town and looks ugly in comparison. Putting that aside, the two most important parts to a fantasy comedy show are, of course, its humor and its story, the latter less to the former. You can have a great comedy with a loose story so long as the jokes pick up the slack. I really wanted to pick one episode to review to give you guys an idea of what the show was like, but the level of competence really changes episode by episode. Some episodes have better story in them, like To Thine Own Elf Be True and Dreamland Falls, and some have stronger jokes in them, like The Princess of Darkness and Castle Party Massacre. However, even the best of the episodes have some very noticeable problems. If I would have to pick the show's biggest weakness, it would be consistency. There are a lot of slow and awkward moments throughout the series. For example, jokes that end up nowhere, dragging on and on even when it wasn't funny to begin with.
I'm gonna have bad dreams about that skillet. Oh, man, that thing was huge.
But then the writing does a complete 180 where everything goes far too fast. I can name two of the worst examples. In the first episode, Bean is inside a building that sits on a very high plateau with a 90-degree cliff face. She is looking for a way to escape her fiancé when he suddenly shows up. Mind you, the only way up the cliff is a tiny elevator that can barely fit a few people, let alone a platoon of men in armor riding horses. So this scene already loses several points. Then one of the worst escape scenes barrels on through like a suburban mom into a Walmart during Black Friday. Tell me, does this look well thought out to you?
Ah, there you are, my love. I've come to take you back to our wedding.
Wow. That was, thrilling. Then in episode 2, it happens again, with the fiancé's men getting back down to the bottom of the plateau faster than somebody plummeting at terminal velocity. Really, that's the best idea you guys could come up with. It was just a cheap way of having Bean get caught again and dragged back to the castle. Look, if you're gonna stick to a theme for a show, you gotta keep to the world's reality. If you want zany cartoon things to happen, that's fine. But you gotta keep it grounded in that world's rules that you set up. When you have rules to your world's reality, you need to follow them to a T. It makes for more interesting writing when you know the limitations of your characters. If there was another way up and down the plateau, like some stairs or a big elevator for comical relief, then show it! If they used magic to teleport themselves, or fly their horses through the power of frickin' farts, then show it! Spice this up with some awkward humor, a comedy style that is not for me to begin with, and some bad TV cliches like the liar revealed arc in episode 7, or several plot devices scattered throughout the show, and you have a nice recipe for a turd burger. The greatest shame of all is how it isn't a complete disaster. A good amount of the slapstick comedy is great and is perfectly timed.
Tell me something about you. Really? Fascinating.
And even though the jokes don't always hit home, at least they're still trying. The show's comedy is not the only thing that hits home about only 50% of the time. In episodes 9 and 10, the story starts to pick up, taking the reins after being in the back seat for so long. In those last 2 episodes, that's really when it starts to shine. It has twists and turns, and by God, the tension had my heart pounding. We even find out that King Zog, who acts nasty and mean, was once a valiant warrior, but he was never meant to be king, and had the throne thrust upon him. He hasn't had it easy, and it only grows worse for him by the end. His daughter goes missing, then he loses his advisors, his knights, and even his entire city in the blink of an eye. Throughout the first season, he is definitely one of the funniest characters in the show, so I do actually like seeing more about him, and I knew there was something deeper about his character. They do this a few times in the series, bringing back things that they introduced in the show early on. The best example I can think of is the bar, the flying scepter, that's introduced in episode 3. It's only later it's explained why it's called that and why there's scepters all over the front of the building. I think the show would have really prospered if they took the most meaningless plot points and terrible long-winded jokes and instead worked on more interesting ideas for the drama side. I'm still not sure what will come from season 2, but maybe they'll hone in the story a bit in the meantime, as well as the jokes. On another note, something I liked that didn't add a huge amount of significance was the background stuff, like signs and people, but it did provide some extra humorous material. My personal favorite was Barnes for Nobles Real Estate. Hats off to them for that joke. In the end, I can tell a lot of people were trying to make this work, but something was holding Disenchantment back from being a great show. If it was another bad series, I could write off these problems as people looking to make a quick buck. But it feels like they had something there that just fell through. Maybe they didn't have enough time to write everything to perfection and had to keep the story moving. Or perhaps somebody quit or just didn't care to keep up the quality of the writing. Whatever the case may be, it really is a shame that the golden nuggets are hidden under a lot of fool's gold. My final score for Disenchantment is a 6.5 out of 10. When it does its job, it does it well. But there's a lot of room for improvement, so here's to hoping the next season cleans itself off. Come on, Matt, you're competing with a great show like BoJack Horseman. You gotta up the ante, man. This isn't poker night at your friend's house. Netflix is the Las Vegas casino of television.
You serious?
Alright, it's the tiny gas station with the 10 slot machines on the edge of Nevada, but still, go big or go home.